Hello, fiction fans. T.H. Leatherman here. I had a wonderful conference over the past weekend. I went to the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Colorado Gold Conference. While I was there, I talked to some of the authors about the craft of writing. I asked them what they thought was important. What's important about the craft of writing? Can you tell me? What's important about the craft of writing? What's important about the craft of writing? Here's what they told me. Hello, T.H. Leatherman here, and today I am with the amazing Alex Hughes.
Hi.
So, Alex, tell us a little bit about your work.
So I write a series called Mindspace Investigations, which is kind of in a weird place between mystery and urban fantasy and science fiction. But I usually describe it as CSI in the future with telepaths.
Outstanding. That sounds wonderful.
My main character is a recovering addict, which is a lot of fun, and he's a very strong telepath working with the cops, which never works out very well for him. So.
All right. So, what is the most important craft thing you've learned as a writer?
I really like description, actually. I ended up reading a lot of books on description as I was coming up. I had this problem where I would write to a white room. Mm-hmm. Like, you could not see anything or how everyone was interacting with each other. And then I started learning description, and I found out that really good description has layers and layers. It's character building, it's world building, it gives opportunities to describe POV. I think description becomes the engine of a really good work. So, for example, if you have my guy who's a telepath, he's going to notice little emotions that happen in different people's point of view. But what I find interesting is that he's a telepath who's not omniscient. Mm-hmm. So just because you understand an emotion doesn't mean you understand why it's there or what it means.
That makes perfect sense.
Or even a thought, thoughts are only so helpful. He interviews people to find out if they did the crime. No one sits around going, I'm the killer, I'm the killer. I hope no one finds out I'm the killer. And so it's a matter of figuring that out. And then, an artist is going to notice colors, and who we are as people affects how we filter the world. And so as we're looking into description, as we're looking into what the world looks like, the details we choose serve lots of different purposes, actually.
All right.
So that's been a lot of fun.
Yes, outstanding. That's very good advice.
Thank you. I really do love description, and it drives me nuts when writers are like, the description is boring. I never read that part. I'm like, you're doing it wrong if it's boring. There should always be something moving, something changing, something that matters. The description should have tension, it should have punch, it should have action, and what Holly Lau calls blinkies.
Blinkies, okay.
So blinkies are when you're describing a cityscape, you don't describe it flat, you describe it with, self-driving cars that are floating between the buildings. You want something moving. You don't describe a cat who's napping, you describe a cat who's chasing, a little mouse.
Mouse or something.
Or
right.
something.
Yeah.
Because the human brain and every other animal brain out there actually is built to pay attention to things that move.
Yes.
And so any description is instantly more interesting if it has things that move.
Yes. What is the character picking up on? And mostly they're going to be picking up on what's moving or what's happening.
And the meaning that you attach to things. Like, yes. And the meaning that you attach to things.
Or the meaning that the character attaches to.
Yes. And I don't really care what someone's face shape is like, although you see a lot of those, particularly in novels from the last century. They describe very carefully what people's face shape is like. I don't care. I care about the things they control that tell me about their character. I care that they think their nose is too big, whether it is or not. I care that maybe they're missing an ear because that tells me life experience. I care that they aggressively do their makeup and then it's streaked down from crying. That I care about.
Oh, yeah.
And I care about very flashy clothes or very, distinctively messy clothes, or I care about the things that matter to who you are as a person.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense.
So, like I said, description ends up being this. I'm such a description geek. I like worlds with lush details. I like and the details I think make a good book.
Outstanding.
So.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Definitely. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Hi everyone, this is T.H. Leatherman, and today I am with Anthony Soner.
Hi, guys.
And Anthony, why don't you tell us a little bit about your work?
So I am a young adult lit RPG fiction writer. So far I have 2 books out, Gather the Party, and the sequel to that, Unite the Party. The third book, Assemble the Party, will be out come sometime the end of this year, I hope. We'll see where that ends up. It's in editing right now. Beyond that, I am just working on putting out some more young adult fiction and fantasy writing for the middle school to young adult age.
Outstanding. So, what can you tell me about what you've learned about the craft? What is the most important craft of writing subject that you think people should know about?
Yeah. For me, especially in doing lit RPG, dialogue is a big important part of craft. I like to read books that it feels like they're speaking naturally. So there are stutters and people stumble over what they're trying to say or can't find what they want to say. I definitely think it's something that you have to refine in your own voice.
Of course.
Because everybody writes differently and everybody speaks differently. I know for myself, I like to duplicate what I say when I'm trying to think really fast.
Okay.
So especially because I write in the D&D fashion,
Right.
You're thinking like instantly during combat, or your long thought is what you want to accomplish. So you have to kind of accumulate that before you speak it, but then when you're put on the spot, you have to really splash it out, and sometimes you get the does, or you choke on something, or you double your words, and
So you end up with a lot of ellipses in your
a
dialogue?
lot of ellipses. And that was especially when I first started. My editors would like crash on me. You use this way too much, or I like to use exclamation point like a lot. I like very excited words and sentences. A lot of those are things I had to learn to cut out.
Yeah, a lot of editors are like, no, don't use more than one exclamation point in a chapter. But they're usually a little bit more accepting of ellipses. You can use ellipses everywhere.
Right. And I love those little pauses in thought that give you that break in dialogue. Just because you can hear almost when you read to yourself the thought that's going on inside that ellipses.
Right. More than a comma. I need a little bit more space.
Right. Give it a little more break.
Right. Outstanding. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hello, T.H. Leatherman here, and I have the amazing Amy Runyan with me today.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
Absolutely. So tell us about your most recent work.
Well, my upcoming novel comes out on November 6th. It's called Girls on the Line, and it's about the American women who were sent over in World War I to work as telephone operators during the war, and they were really instrumental in getting American women the right to vote.
Outstanding. Did you want to talk about any of your other work, or?
Well, my novel that just came out in January is called Daughters of the Night Sky. That has to do with the Russian female fighter pilots in World War II, who are kind of an unsung bit of history that we don't get to hear about very often. That's kind of my brand. That's what I do. I write about women who are not really known about in history and their contributions that have gone unheralded, which is really unfortunate. And my first 2 books were 17th century novels about the women who were sent over as mail order brides by Louis XIV and who ended up making a huge genetic contribution to Canada. They're the mothers of 2/3 of all French Canadians, essentially.
Wow,
So,
outstanding.
Yeah. So yeah, it was just I started that because of my master's thesis and the research I found out about these women that were just kind of sent over as a bit of a project to help bolster the population, and they ended up leaving a trace on the country that has never, that they can never erase, really, because but you never hear about them in history books, which is a shame.
Yes, absolutely. What advice would you offer to authors as far as the craft is concerned? What do you think is important in writing?
Well, I think it's really important to remember that a story isn't about someone, it's not about something. It's about something happening to someone. And it's really important to remember that you have to have amazingly well-developed characters that will engage the reader, because the reader needs to be able to imprint themselves upon the characters that they're reading to be able to relate to the story.
Right.
And you have to have an arc that has the character experiencing and growing throughout that. And so to pay attention to the development of the story itself. And plotting is kind of a sketchy term at times, because that's the something, and the characters is someone. The story is really the something happening to someone. So to focus on those two elements, the plot and the character, together, to remember that those two really can't be separated. They have to be married for a book to really work.
Absolutely.
And that's the important thing, is to really remember that the story is about the character's journey and coming to the other side of some obstacle.
Right.
Yeah, and to really flesh out both of those things kind of simultaneously is the best way to do it.
Outstanding. Cool.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you very much for talking with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for listening.
T.H. Leatherman here, and I am talking with Carrie King, also known as Carrie Schaefer.
Yes.
And Carrie, why don't you tell us about your most recent book?
Okay, I would love to. So my most recent book is a Carrie King book. Those are my women's fiction novels.
Okay.
It's called Whisper Me This. It came out officially. It was lucky enough to be an Amazon reader's first book.
Okay.
So it was officially published August the 1st, and it is actually doing extremely well for me, and I'm a very happy author right now.
Outstanding.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
I know, isn't it? You never know when it's going to happen, so it's exciting.
So what is your advice for writers as far as the craft? What do you think is important for them to know?
I think that one of the most important things, well, my very first most important thing is always write the book, finish the book. There's so many people that give up in the middle, and the middle
Yes.
is hard, and that doubt will always get you. So write the book anyways.
Yeah.
So a big thing for me right now, Todd, that I'm really talking about is figuring out what your process is, and then staying true to that.
Okay.
Instead of trying to be a different kind of writer.
Okay, can you expound on that?
I can, absolutely. So let's talk pantsers versus plotters. That's a really big one. So
Yes.
a lot of us, just by temperament type, I'm also into Myers-Briggs a lot. So there are a couple of types of us who tend to not like to have things planned ahead. And we do very well on intuition. So, for example, I'm an INFP, for those of you who know what that means. And what that means is I operate on intuition. I find it very difficult to do anything without having an intuitive hit about it.
Okay.
And so, as a writer, if I try and plot everything out ahead and then write, it doesn't work out very well for me at all.
Okay.
And I can very easily get feeling overwhelmed, trapped, like I'm a really crappy writer. My writing isn't going to be very good, because really what works for me is to write when I have a little hit, and then to keep thinking about my characters and working until I get the next hit, and then moving forward.
I see. That actually makes a lot of sense. And me, I am an ENTJ.
Right, and you probably need to have everything all laid out.
That's right.
Because, right. So if someone were to try and convince you that you needed to write in this intuitive fashion, you would probably get
Yeah, I would be like, I need to know where I'm going.
Right, you would
Right.
get very anxious and maybe not write, and things would not go well for you. And
Okay.
so what I find is when we come to conferences, you have a lot of people who really, really believe that there is only one way to do things. And so a lot of us, not you so much. The T's among us tend to pretty much know that they're right about things, and that's okay, that's good. Others of us tend to be swayed a little bit. It's like, oh, I'm doing it wrong, I should do it the other way, and then we spend all of this time trying to be something that we're not.
Right.
And it does not make for our very best writing.
I would agree with that.
Right. So I would like to clarify that doesn't mean that just because you don't have an intuitive hit doesn't mean that you get to not do any writing
No, yeah.
for days at a time. So
The important thing is to keep writing.
you're going to keep writing, you're going to keep working forward, you're going to keep doing character development, or writing what you can as far as you can see, and then keep it moving. So you don't get to just say, oh, I only write when I'm inspired, because books don't really get
Come
written
out
that
way.
way.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
If you've enjoyed these interviews, check out the links for the author's books below. As always, thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel. I post weekly. If you have a question or topic you'd like for me to cover, message me on Facebook. If you enjoyed this episode, like or comment below. So long, fiction fans!